shouldn't have come here.
When Capcom announced Resident Evil 7, there was a major concern from the community involving the company's decision to change from the traditional third-person perspective to a more shooter-influenced first-person perspective. Although this was not the first time a Resident Evil title had a first-person perspective, the new take on the famous survival horror franchise raised some questions about the tone and atmosphere of the incoming installment. Would Resident Evil 7 return to its roots like in the first games? Or would it be a more over-the-top Michael Bay action game, the type we saw in Resident Evil 6?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Michael Bay for joining us.
Fortunately for horror fans, Resident Evil 7 took its time to analyze what makes a game truly terrifying, drawing inspiration from several horror classics. In this video, we will talk about some of those references, and how they are used to reimagine this new nightmare. So, without further ado,
Welcome to the family, son.
there are at least 3 main inspirations when starting Resident Evil 7. The first, and most obvious, is Hideo Kojima's PT. PT, an acronym for Playable Teaser, was yet another PR stunt from Kojima to announce his new title. Unfortunately, the project was cancelled by Konami, resulting in PT being even removed from the PlayStation Store. Hideo Kojima left the company afterwards to find his own studio, Kojima Productions. However, PT's spirit lived on in Resident Evil 7. A similar eerie atmosphere, the same claustrophobic corridors, and of course, a first-person view that makes the experience as terrifying as the original PT demo.
Heck of a thing, and it sure shit beats the hell out of dying.
The second main source of inspiration is Tobe Hooper's classic film The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oil storage units continue to burn out of control at the huge Texaco refinery near the Texas-Louisiana border.
In the movie, a group of city folk get lost somewhere in deep Texas, only to be brutally murdered by a family of psychopaths.
don't think there's gonna be any. Come here uninvited.
This premise soon became a common trope in horror films after Hooper's success, and all of them had a similar setting. A bunch of outsiders wander into deep America, a place where the crazy locals roam free to do whatever they please.
Well, I've been here since the war.
Which war?
You know damn well which war.
Which is exactly what happens to Resident Evil 7's main character, Ethan Winters.
Where am I? What the hell?
Rise and shine, sleepyhead. It's time for supper.
Ethan travels to Louisiana hoping to find his lost wife, Mia, just to be quickly abducted by the Baker family.
It's good.
Dumb son bitch wasn't no good if it hit him.
Yes.
This trope is present not only in several films, but also on TV.
Come on, squeal! Squeal!
Big, fat, and juicy.
Stop, we're on fire!
In fact, the imagery of Resident Evil 7 draws heavily from a more recent and critically acclaimed HBO show.
From the dusty mesa, her looming shadow grows, hidden in the branches of the poison creosote. She twines her spines up slowly towards the boiling sun. And when I
Boo. Where did you find this guy? Give me a break, Pete. Hey, I only work with professionals.
The third and last influence is another famous trope in horror films: found footage. Throughout Resident Evil 7, players come across videotapes that become playable flashbacks if you manage to find a VCR.
Ethan, if you find this, I know I can't expect anything from you. Not after what happened.
These flashbacks fill the holes in the story, providing some additional information about events and secondary characters. The found footage trope went viral in 1999 thanks to the Blair Witch Project, spawning dozens of horror flicks in the process. These three elements are combined in Resident Evil 7 to create a constant feeling of abandonment and fear. Suddenly, you are trapped in a world where the rules of civilization do not apply anymore. No one can help you now, and boy, the Bakers are coming for you.
Hey, we gotta get the fuck out of here.
Now, first you need to tell me what you're doing out here alone in the middle of the night.
Me? What about you?
No, it's my job. Why don't you do your job and tell me? Answer my questions.
You're not gonna believe me if I told you.
Try me. Hey, put that door back. Put that door back up. Wait!
I mean, I told you not to go in that house. feast. Come on, boy.
Right at the beginning of the game, we are quickly introduced to Jack, the paterfamilias of the Baker family. A loving father wants the exposure to the mold, Resident Evil 7's new bioweapon, has now turned him into a mutated madman with superhuman strength and an enhanced healing factor.
She wants me to do this. I have to show her how to hold. She wants us all to show her our love.
Daddy!
Jack, like Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 and Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, is a force of nature who will chase you relentlessly during the majority of the game.
You're wasting your time!
He is also based on another horror trope, the slasher. The slasher trope has been immortalized on the big screen multiple times, with the likes of Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers as their main ambassadors amongst many others. These guys are known for being near indestructible killing machines, leaving a pile of corpses wherever they go as their personal trademark. Like Jack, the slasher is unstoppable, and they will always come back.
Oh boy! Now look what you've done, motherfucker! Do I have your attention, boy? You're about to see something wonderful. Oh, fuck!
Do me a favor and stay dead.
Zoe! Get your ass back to the house! I will deal with you later!
Jack is in fact so resilient that you need to play through Resident Evil 7's End of Zoe DLC to learn of his demise. In the DLC, Joe Baker, Jack's brother, a Wolverine-like character, must face what remains of his brother after the main events of Resident Evil 7.
You don't know what you're talking about. You don't get it. You think I don't know who you people are? With all these monsters running around here. Tell me, where'd they come from?
This DLC takes place in the swamps and feels a bit like a mix between the Creature of the Black Lagoon
No! Just untie me, and I'll take you there. Please!
What base?
Hey! You got it!
Zoe, I brought your medicine. You're going to be fine. No! Zoe! Hey! Leave my family alone, asshole!
and Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
I'm from a future you won't see, Swamp Thing.
My power is eternal.
Doesn't mean you can't die.
Ultimately, Joe manages to finish Jack by one-punching him to death in a final showdown.
This a farewell from the family, brother.
We will miss you, Jack.